In his essay, The Unreachables, psychoanalyst Theodore Reich wrote, "There are recurring cycles, ups and downs, but the course of events is essentially the same with small variation. It has been said that history repeats itself. This is perhaps not quite correct. It merely rhymes." One only has to look to the events of George Bush's presidency to see the effects of this excerpt in action, as identical problems are occurring today.
Turns out better than 205. Well, Kim Jong's phone fits and the shuttle's on the first.
The military is currently stripped of the deficits arising. And for Europe hates my guts. And industrial America is going bankrupt. There is a great sense of urgency. We got
You can see CHP also has.
This is an all-time low, approval rating,
it's not another year like
61% disapprove.
But an example of this phenomenon that's gone largely overlooked is the eerie similarities between two men of equally immense charisma, their exploitation of an aimless and disillusioned youth, and their rises to positions of power and arguably worship. This is L Ron Hubbard. This is Hasan Piker. Hasan Piker is, at the time of writing, amongst the most subscribed streamers on Twitch. His prominence began with his tenure at the Young Turks, a progressive news and commentary program distributed across YouTube, Twitch, and select television networks. Broadcasting live for several hours each day, Piker has developed a vast and varied catalog of political discussion, cultural critique, and personal commentary, material that, like Hubbard's writing, has attracted both dedicated followers and persistent controversy. Lafayette Ronald Hubbard was a prolific American author. Outside of founding the religious movement Scientology, he is perhaps best known for his over 1,000 pulp science fiction stories, which were published throughout the 1930s and 40s in magazines such as Astounding Science Fiction and Unknown. Recognized by some record-keeping organizations as the most published author in history, Hubbard produced a plethora of works across multiple genres. The critical reception of his fiction has varied widely, however, though titles such as Final Blackout, Fear, and Battlefield Earth remain amongst his most frequently cited works. For many, their first encounter with Hasan Piker comes not through his own broadcast, but through the constellation of online personalities that surround him. Amongst these is Ian Joma, a YouTuber once considered a leading figure of internet culture, though whose subsequent downfall has seemingly been mired in his collaborations with, and subsequent attempts to mimic, Piker.
Especially if people see me as the white Hasan.
Similarly, the first place many people hear of L Ron Hubbard's religious movement, Scientology, is through its most famous adherent, actor Tom Cruise.
I think it's a privilege to call yourself a Scientologist, and it's something that you have to earn.
Cruise's devotion and visibility have made him a de facto public face of the church, keeping Hubbard's creation in the cultural spotlight long after its founding.
In my life, and I've been a Scientologist for over 30 years, and it's something that, as you know, without it, I wouldn't be where I am. You know, so it's a beautiful religion, and I'm very proud.
With introductions complete, this documentary aims to explore the parallels between both figures, while also considering a question that has often been raised in discussions of modern media and politics: whether the contemporary left has begun to mirror the structure of a religion, and whether Piker himself stands as its pundit. A point frequently raised in discussions about Hasan Piker is the apparent discrepancy between his political messaging and his personal lifestyle. A recurring theme in his content is a sharp criticism of both wealth concentration and individuals in positions of power.
I mean, what do we think? Warren Buffett's a good guy then? The fuck? They're all fucking demons, dog. They all suck.
874 Bellevue Drive, and I'm gonna kill you with my AR-15. That's the type of messages they were leaving in this dude's office, and he's resigning. He's literally, this is his last term.
Left-wingers, liberals, you need to be fucking showing your opponent's guts on there, okay? You need to be gutting them. You need to be shanking these motherfuckers and letting their intestines just ride on stage. What the fuck is this shit?
Yet Piker has also publicly acknowledged his own material comfort and social connections. His career began at the Young Turks, a progressive online news network founded by his uncle, Cenk Uygur, where he first worked as a producer and later as an on-camera commentator. This familial link has led some critics to describe his rise as an example of media nepotism, though supporters would counter that his charisma and audience engagement have allowed him to succeed independently ever since leaving the outlet. Still, in 2021, Piker purchased a $2.74 million West Hollywood home, a transaction which was widely reported by Newsweek and LA Magazine. He's also reported to own a Porsche Taycan, a vehicle valued at roughly $200,000, and frequently showcases other luxury goods on both his Twitch streams and other social media profiles. These displays of wealth have drawn criticism from both political opponents and parts of his own audience, who both see a contradiction between his socialist rhetoric and affluent lifestyle. The piece, Festival, also known as Destroy Capitalism, by street artist Banksy, perhaps best captures the paradoxical style of Piker's brand. He is an anti-establishment figure who simultaneously relies on paid subscriptions and sells expensive merchandise to fans, turning dissent into a revenue stream without erasing its performative power. By contrast, L Ron Hubbard's ascent began in markedly different circumstances, but ultimately produced a similar blend of ideology, ambition, and material success. During the Great Depression, Hubbard supported himself as a freelance pulp fiction writer, contributing hundreds of stories and novellas to magazines, such as Astounding Science Fiction and Unknown. His first major entry, The Dangerous Dimension, brought him modest recognition within the pulp community, though not great wealth. The following decade, Hubbard would carefully cultivate a public persona for himself as an adventurer and polymath, akin to Indiana Jones. He simultaneously claimed both extensive military service and extensive academic credentials, many of which were later disputed, but these embellishments enhanced a larger-than-life image that nonetheless attracted readers and eventually followers. In post-war Los Angeles, influenced by both psychology and occult circles, including his own association with rocket engineer and mystic Jack Parsons, Hubbard began blending metaphysical language with speculative fiction. The result? Dianetics, the modern science of mental health, a best-selling 1950 self-help book that launched a movement. As Hubbard's following continued to grow, so did his material fortune. Royalties from Dianetics and revenue from the expanding Church of Scientology would go on to fund multiple properties, including his 1959 purchase of St. Hill Manor in Sussex, England, and a fleet of ships, the Apollo, Athena, and Diana, which would come to be known as the Sea Org, a maritime-based religious order. By the 1960s, Hubbard had transformed from pulp fiction writer to global religious leader, commanding both loyalty and wealth. His later life mirrored that of a self-made mogul, complete with private vessels, secluded estates, and layers of institutional secrecy. If Piker's career evokes Banksy's ironic commodification of rebellion, Hubbard's enterprise resembles Damien Hirst's For the Love of God, the literal transformation of morality, faith, and transcendence into luxury commodity. In parallel to how Hasan Piker is often described as speaking directly to young men through his long-form conversational live streams, Dianetics addresses a similar social gap, the mid-20th century's lack of accessible, mass-market guides to personal mental well-being aimed at lay readers. Piker's appeal rests, in large part, on the format and audience of platforms like Twitch, which are disproportionately young and disproportionately male, and on his ability to combine political argument with informative life advice during multi-hour broadcasts. At the same time, decades of research show that men are significantly less likely than women to seek formal mental health treatment, a gap that digestible self-help materials have historically attempted to remedy. When Dianetics appeared in 1950, it was explicitly pitched as a practical system for overcoming mental apparitions, and contemporary accounts treated as a mass-market self-help text, which repurposed quasi-clinical language for a general readership. That combination of technical phrasing, promises of practical results, and emphasis on male self-mastery helped it resonate with readers in an era when formal mental health care was much less widely accessible and much more stigmatized. By contrast, Hasan Piker's public persona mixes political advocacy with elements of personal advice and lifestyle coaching in a distinctively left-wing register. This sets him apart from other online figures who also speak to young men but from different political positions, such as Canadian psychologist and former McGill University, Harvard University, and University of Toronto professor Jordan Peterson, or the idiosyncratic Andy Kaufman-esque performance artist and blacklisted comedian Sam Hyde. The upshot is that neither man invented the demand for layman's mental health guidance, but that each met that demand through forms that reflected their times and politics. Hubbard, via a published system that barred therapeutic language, and Piker, via conversational streaming that blends analysis, entertainment, and personal counsel. A less frequently discussed point concerns the labor structures surrounding both enterprises. Piker, though a vocal advocate of workers' rights, has faced criticism from former collaborators, particularly moderators and video editors, who allege minimal or no pay for their contributions, with Piker even outright stating he does not see a need to pay either.
You're paying right, a percentage or something proportional to the millions that you're making off Twitch, right? Does that carry over to your Twitch? So sure, I believe you for your podcast.
To who? To what?
To editors, to moderators.
Yes.
So you're paying moderators or head of moderation?
No, not editors and not moderators.
It should also be noted that a large portion of Piker's live streams concern his nonverbal reactions to existing content by other users who often do not give explicit permission for Piker to profit from their content. In a 2019 Reddit post later reported on by outlets like .esports and The Gamer, a former editor claimed to have produced several YouTube videos for Piker's channel without any compensation. Piker responded that, while this was indeed true, editors are paid only when formally contracted, and only acquiesce to payment once this ordeal was publicized. Furthermore, he argued that moderation on his Twitch channel, as with many other large channels, remains a voluntary role. Critics see tension between that model and his advocacy for fair labor standards. Supporters counter that unpaid moderation is a norm across online communities and is not inherently exploitative, and that reaction content has become the norm across the Twitch platform. Hubbard's organizational structure presents a similar paradox. His teachings emphasize empowerment and self-improvement, yet accounts from former members describe conditions that diverge sharply from those ideals. The church's Sea Org, a quasi-monaistic order staffed by its most dedicated adherents, requires members to sign symbolic billion-year contracts and work long hours for nominal weekly stipends. Indeed, reports from the Tampa Bay Times and LA Times place average pay at around $50 a week for Sea Org members, with housing and food provided by the church. Scientology officials maintain that Sea Org participation is voluntary and spiritual rather than economic, yet the contrast between the organization's vast financial assets and the modest circumstance of its labor force remains a persistent source of scrutiny for many. As popular culture has consistently made a mockery of the movements both L Ron Hubbard and Hasan Piker inspired, outsiders may be curious as to how either continues to sustain such a devout following, despite the relentless criticism directed at their work. Just as South Park's 2005 episode, Trapped in the Closet, lampoons Scientology's unique cosmology, depicting the galactic ruler Xenu alongside the caption, "This is what Scientologists actually believe."
Xenu thought his galaxy was overpopulated. And so he rounded up countless aliens from all different planets, and then had those aliens frozen. The frozen alien bodies were loaded onto Xenu's galactic cruisers. The cruisers then took the frozen alien bodies to our planet, Earth, and dumped them into the volcanoes of Hawaii. The souls of those aliens, however, lived on. The souls were taken to a huge soul brainwashing facility, which Xenu had also built on Earth. There the souls were forced to watch days of brainwashing material. At the dawn of man, the souls finally found bodies which they could grab onto. They attached themselves to all mankind, which still to this day causes all our fears, our confusions, and our problems.
Piker has become a similar target of parody in online spaces.
There's a fella that I know you want very much. That's a fella by the name of Hasan Piker. Are you going to get that fight?
Oh, I will if I have to go to Hollywood. Myself and me lonesome on me little moped. I'll go out there and get him, Donick. You'll see. I'll be out there committing a crime and stalking him because I'm gay and I'm obsessed with him.
Critics have argued that his reporting style often blends the reactionary with unsourced speculation. According to media analysis organization Ad Fontes Media, Piker's Hasanabi channel sits firmly within the hyper-partisan left category and is rated as having low reliability. In the modern online ecosystem, this positioning places Piker's coverage alongside figures on the ideological opposite end of the spectrum, such as Alex Jones, whose broadcasts similarly merge entertainment, outrage, and conjecture to sustain audience loyalty.
And I'm not saying people didn't naturally have homosexual feelings. I'm not even getting into it, quite frankly. I mean, give me a break. You think I am like, oh, shocked by it, so I'm up here bashing it because I don't like gay people? I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
Where Jones notoriously advanced right-wing conspiracy theories about the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting, Piker has at times faced criticism for provocative or speculative remarks of his own. Most notably, when he suggested that the May 21st Israeli embassy shooting may have been orchestrated to raise support for the Israeli government amidst an ongoing conflict.
This is an adventurist who thought that he would get like Luigi Mangione level prominence off of this or something, or just a dude who thought that this was the best possible thing to do. But like I'm not Mr. False Flag at all, but like every single thing that he did in the aftermath of the shooting is so crazy that it's like you could not have designed a incident like this You could not have designed a better false flag incident like this. I'm not saying it is a false flag incident at all. I'm not saying that. I think this is just a one dude who is genuine in his actions and maybe, you know, a little bit brain broken, okay? But it is crazy. This was legit the worst thing that could happen to the movement? No, it's not. And you guys need to stop doing that. That's another thing that I don't like.
This statement circulated widely on social media and was condemned by commentators across the political spectrum for mirroring the exact same kind of reactive, emotionally charged framing that Piker himself often criticizes in the mainstream media. At the same time, Scientology's account of the origins of consciousness on Earth explains why it so easily invites parody. The story of immortal alien Phaeton spirits imprisoned by intergalactic dictator Xenu and released into Hawaiian volcanoes reads like a George Lucas special edition rewrite of the Bible. Yet what is so often overlooked in the constant mockery is the order in which these ideas are introduced. As detailed in Lawrence Wright's Going Clear, new members of the Church of Scientology are not told at all about Xenu until they've reached advanced OT or operating Phaeton levels, after years of study, emotional investment, and institutional immersion. By that point, adherents have already accepted the Church's metaphysical framework, making the extraordinary feel almost logical within its own system. The same process, belief through gradual normalization, can be observed in parts of Piker's audience. As critics writing in The Spectator and The Atlantic have noted, new viewers often begin watching for entertainment or out of political curiosity, but over time become acclimated to Piker's increasingly radical or incendiary rhetoric. Statements which would have once seemed excessive or implausible now seem mundane and expected. What begins as education or catharsis can, through repetition and community reinforcement, evolve into ideological immersion.
Covered by Medicaid now going to potentially lose Medicaid coverage as a result of this?
We're not going to touch Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. What we are going to do is go into those programs and carve out the fraud, waste, and abuse and find efficiencies. Couple of examples. You know, there's about $50 billion estimated that are lost every year in Medicaid just in fraud alone.
That fraud is not coming from individuals, it's coming from providers. They're not tackling providers. They're not actually going after like false billing. They are trying to cut recipients. If you cared about Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud, you would Rick Scott.
In both cases, extremity is not introduced abruptly. It's absorbed incrementally until it feels natural. Figures like Hubbard and Piker both attract devout followers not only because of their ideas, but because they offer a sense of order and meaning to those who feel trapped by uncertainty. The appeal of these figures lies less in ideology itself, rather than the structure and belonging they provide. This recurring dynamic, the promise of understanding as a pathway to liberation, helps explain why their influence persists, even under constant scrutiny. Amongst Piker's closest political parallels may be former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who, like Piker, has often been described by analysts and editorial boards, such as those of the Globe and Mail and the National Post, as a politician whose charisma and conventionally attractive physical appearance amplify his appeal significantly. Trudeau's youthful image and progressive messaging at times wallpapered over bigger issues such as policy inconsistencies and personal controversies. Similarly, Piker's relaxed tone and conversational delivery have allowed him to popularize left-wing ideas amongst younger, more digitally native audiences, who may not have the time nor desire to fully immerse themselves into complex world issues. Admirers describe Piker as a gateway to political engagement. Detractors, meanwhile, argue that his casual approach risks diluting complex political discourse into spectacle and simplifies complex, morally gray issues into a simple us versus them narrative. In both cases, performance and principle blur, leaving supporters inspired and critics skeptical. In the literary sphere, Hubbard's closest creative counterpart may be Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry. Both men began as veterans and science fiction writers, striving to merge speculative storytelling with philosophical inquiry. But as cultural historians like John Clute and Jerry Westphal observe, Roddenberry's work was fundamentally humanist, an optimistic vision of progress rooted in empathy, rational thought, and collective growth. Meanwhile, Hubbard, by contrast, took speculative fiction and recast it as revelation. Dianetics offers an empirical step-by-step method for overcoming trauma, a fusion of psychology, metaphysics, and pulp-era imagination that promises readers control and clarity, and thus resonated strongly to a war-shaken America. As the movement evolved into Scientology, Hubbard codified his teachings into a rigid structure of levels, rules, and organizations that blurred the line between philosophy, therapy, and religion. As Russell Miller noted in his 1987 biography, Barefaced Messiah, Hubbard's genius lay in his ability to translate pseudoscience into scripture, using familiar scientific language to cloak his metaphysical ideas and credibility. Viewed together, Both Piker and Hubbard more accurately would seem to recall the showmanship of P.T. Barnum, a 19th century circus owner and politician who built his empire on the understanding that conviction could be performed and the audiences would embrace even the implausible if it offered wonder or meaning, something both men do through different lenses. In their own ways, both men have transformed charisma into ideology, ideology into performance, and performance into belief, sustaining influence through a delicate mix of devotion and controversy. It is perhaps for this reason that both Scientology and the Hasan community have been frequently accused of responding harshly to criticism. The Church of Scientology has long maintained a policy known as fair game, originally set forth by founder L Ron Hubbard in the 1960s. According to internal policy letters, individuals declared suppressive persons, whether they were critics, ex-members, or perceived enemies of the church, may be deprived of property or injured by any means by any Scientologist without any discipline of the Scientologist. While the church officially canceled the term in 1968, critics and some legal rulings maintain that the underlying practices continued. In recent years, the phrase might seem archaic, but the logic of identity enforcement, community policing, and external retaliation remains instructive for understanding how belief systems protect themselves. For example, in March 2025, streamers and community observers discussed allegations that Hasan Piker's fandom had targeted his former podcast co-host Ethan Klein.
Sunday afternoon, I'm relaxing with my family, and I get a text from a friend with a link to a video in it, and it's a video of my good old friend Hasan Piker claiming that my wife Hila would be a valid military target. Let's take a look.
DFLP, PFLP, or even former Fatah militants. Okay, it is perfectly legal, perfectly valid, and perfectly moral. Okay, 100%. This is not like this is not a gray area. This is black and white. Okay, it doesn't get more black and white than this. Israel's in the wrong. Israel is actually engaging in an apartheid, which is a crime in and of itself. Israel's doing a genocide in Gaza and an apartheid in the West Bank. 2 crimes in and of itself. And every type of armed resistance against both the settlers and also the Israeli occupying force in the West Bank. Doesn't matter if it's your favorite podcasters like Wife that participate in the Israelis. Doesn't matter if they're...
So... Hasan has been trying to claim that he meant only people during the raid would be legit to exact violence on it. But even if it's true that that's what he meant, why is he making it sound like she escaped justice? Wouldn't that justify a form of justice catching up to her? Right? It's something she has coming, right? Why even include a specific person who hasn't served in the military in 20 years? Why does he mix up past and present tense while he's discussing this? You know, is this a responsible use of his words and his platform? Don't you think that even if what you're saying is true and you meant only people on that raid would deserve violence, that invoking a specific person is really appropriate and true? And doesn't that have the risk for provoking the craziest people in your audience to think that maybe it would be a good idea to kill my wife?
By submitting a report to Child Protective Services regarding his children, and, almost concurrently, by mailing 2 human skulls to his residence, something a fan of Piker's, Bad Empanada, was quick to take credit for.
I'd like to pay tribute to Ethan Klein and the new Twitch TOS that declares Zionism. Zion is a slur. I'd like to pay tribute to him by playing the first in Al-Aqsa video game where you kill Zionist soldiers as a Palestinian resistance fighter. And this game has been like massively, for no reason aside from the fact that it dares to depict an Arab as the hero and Israelis as the villain. They denounce it as like a terrorist game when you fight nothing but soldiers. And recently, this game was geo-blocked in the UK.
According to Klein, the CPS visit and skull mail incident occurred around the same time and led to an FBI interview. Others in the community dispute elements of the claim, but the controversy underscores how online followings can mobilize in support of, or in retaliation for, their leader. In both communities, the mechanism is analogous. Dissent or criticism is treated not as opinion, but as threat. The community defines boundaries of loyalty, and enforcement can include public shaming, social ostracization, or external actions. Understanding this parallel helps explain how both movements respond to critique, and how belonging in the group becomes intertwined with policing outsiders.
But surely it's authoritarian in its treatment of suppressive people, that kind of thing. I mean, you don't allow criticism.
Oh no, a suppressive person isn't critical. A suppressive person is a person who denies the right of others.
If Luigi had done it, of course. Allegedly. I'm saying allegedly Luigi Mangione, who I think is an innocent man and is unjustly maligned, if allegedly he had done this act, that would be the equivalent to what took place here. That would be the equivalent to what took place here. Now, I'm not going to entertain the emotional blackmail that Israel defenders who very clearly don't care about victims of Islamophobia, or even these people that died and simply only care about defending Israel's interests, the emotional blackmail that they are going to try to enforce here at a time when Israel has very openly stated their desire for permanent ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip. That's not going to happen. Okay, so don't expect that from me. I'm not entertaining.
For many followers, personal identity becomes deeply intertwined with the group's worldview, and to question that worldview, or its central figure, is to question the framework through which they understand themselves and the world around them. When criticism arises, it is therefore not merely perceived as disagreement, but as a moral attack. With both parties, this has historically taken the form of targeted campaigns against dissenters, who not only threaten a belief system, but a sense of self that depends upon it. The more that outsiders challenge their prophets, the more tightly followers cling to the narratives that make their loyalty feel righteous. In every era, belief finds its language. For L Ron Hubbard, it was pulp and ritual. For Hasan Piker, it is live stream and feed. From the late 1940s through to the early 1960s, science fiction entered what scholars often call its golden age. This was an era defined by post-war optimism, Cold War paranoia, and a fascination with the unknown. American culture was alive with speculation about UFOs, alien visitors, and interplanetary life, which gave life to contemporary myths like the Flatwoods Monster and Mothman. As historian Christopher Partridge notes in his novel The Reenchantment of the West, the flying saucer craze of the 1950s created a secular mythology all of its own, a cosmology for a scientific age. Within that climate, Scientology resonated as both self-help and science fiction prophecy. Hubbard's vision of Thetans, trapped in cycles of trauma and liberation, mirrored the broader cultural hunger for cosmic explanation. The late 1940s saw headlines about the Roswell incident of 1947, claims of cattle mutilations in rural America, and the emergence of contactee movements, small religious groups whose members believed they communicated with extraterrestrial beings, some of which still persist to this day. For audience already primed to see the universe as inhabited by mysterious intelligences, Hubbard's framing of the human condition as a cosmic drama between spiritual freedom and alien comfort fit the anxieties and aspirations of the age. Sociologists of religion, such as Hugh Urban, have argued that Scientology's rise can only be understood in the context of mid-century America's synthesis of technology, psychology, and faith. It offered a religion that sounds scientific, one that promises personal empowerment through a structured process of self-improvement. In that sense, Hubbard's movement did not stand apart from its time, it embodied it. Nearly 70 years later, the digital landscape would generate a comparable shift in how people encounter belief, ideology, and community. By the late 2010s, platforms like Twitch and YouTube Live had transformed media consumption from passive viewing into interactive participation. In the aftermath of the 2016 US election, and amidst an unending news cycle, live streaming became a space where political commentary flourished and would become blurred with entertainment. Viewers no longer consumed the news, they co-experienced it with personalities who interpret it for them in real time. Hasan Piker emerged within this ecosystem as a charismatic translator of political events for a digital generation. His broadcast combined analysis, humor, and conversational authenticity, creating an atmosphere that scholars like T.L. Taylor in Watch Me Play, Twitch and the Rise of Game live streaming describe as communal intimacy. The viewer becomes both spectator and participant, shaping discussion through chat messages, donations, and shared memes. The appeal of many of Piker's opinions lies partly in what might be called accessible complexity, a version of politics designed for immediate identification and gratification. In a media environment saturated with information, he provides an interpretive shortcut, a sense of orientation amid the noise. As communication theorist Marshall McLuhan once observed, the medium is the message, and in Piker's case, the medium of live conversation becomes the politics itself. His streams offer a feeling of belonging and comprehension, rather than the slow uncertainty of independent inquiry. This model of participatory commentary has proven influential. Other creators have adapted Piker's format, mirroring his cadence, camera framing, and on-stream style, to the point that they refer to themselves, half-ironically, as waiting rooms for his content. The phrase captures both the loyalty of his community and the hierarchical nature of the ecosystem surrounding it. The Hasanabi brand, as with any strong institution, extends beyond its founder into an orbit of smaller satellites, which all reflect his worldview and tone. Hubbard's legacy, too, inspired its own constellation of successors. Amongst the most notable is Happy Science, founded in Japan in 1986 by former investment banker Ryoho Okawa. Much in the same way as Scientology wove together psychology, science fiction, and spirituality, Happy Science fuses Buddhist cosmology with New Age teachings and Western esotericism. Okawa's movement became a fixture of Japanese pop culture, its iconography appearing frequently in media, such as Earthbound's Happy Happiest cult, a clear parody of the movement. Cultural critics in publications like the Japan Times have described Happy Science as Scientology through an anime lens, translating the same promises of enlightenment and empowerment into a distinctively Japanese idiom. Both Scientology and the Hasanabi community thus demonstrate how new escapist technologies, from pulp science fiction to just chatting Twitch live streams, can function as instruments of belief. Each transforms its medium into a site of ritual, whether through auditing sessions or subscription tiers, confessional self-improvement, or public commentary, and in both cases, the audience's participation becomes the true liturgy. For at their core, both Scientology and the Hasanabi community are built around the same general promise, that the act of engagement itself is transformative. In both spaces, participation becomes a form of purification, an ongoing process through which followers attempt to align their personal understanding of the world with the vision offered directly by their chosen leader. Psychologists studying high-commitment belief systems often refer to this process as cognitive enclosure, a phenomenon in which the individual's identity becomes intertwined with the interpretive framework of a group. As Robert J. Lifton described in Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, the power of a belief system lies not in its extremity, but in its capacity to define the boundaries of acceptable thought. Once those boundaries are internalized, dissent begins to feel like betrayal. Critics have often argued that Piker's rhetorical style relies heavily on moral polarization, positioning his political adversaries not merely as wrong, but as actively harmful to human rights and social progress. This framing, while resonant with his audience, can also create an environment where dissenting opinions are interpreted as moral failings, as opposed to simple differences of perspective.
Clown take. Can you shut the fuck up when it comes to black folks? You really don't want to talk about us unless it comes from voting. When is the last time you spoke about Sudan? I'm gonna fucking ether you. Any other black folk want to engage in radical activist language in this fucking chat? Suck my fucking cock, okay? You stupid fucking radlib. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of my chat. Fucking stupid, moronic, fucking radlib nonsense. Suck my fucking dick. Fuck you. You think you have a pass in here to fucking speak like this? Get the fuck out of here.
As communication scholar Joanne Donovan observes in her studies of influencer-led movements, charisma becomes a substitute for evidence when the audience's trust in the speaker outweighs their trust in the process.
Some people find that helpful. They're told by you, and I'm sure you can do it very well.
Not by me. Not by me. This ship's company right now.
They think they're told by you. At Seitel, and they feel that you are a strength for them in that way.
Anybody who has inspired a movement would be a strength for them.
Within Scientology, this dynamic takes a more formalized shape. Those labeled suppressive are described by the church's own literature as individuals who seek to obstruct spiritual progress. The label functions as both a warning and a boundary, delegating who is worthy of engagement and who must be cast out. In both ecosystems, disagreement is reinterpreted as a threat and criticism as hostility. Sociologists often refer to this structure as a moral binary system, wherein the world is divided between the enlightened and the deceived. It is an efficient architecture for maintaining cohesion. Any external critique can be reinterpreted as validation, proof that the movement's enemies are fearful of its truth. This feedback loop creates a kind of self-reinforcing faith, resilient against contradiction. At the same time, It will be reductive to dismiss these communities purely as manipulative or delusional. Both provide their members with a sense of clarity in an age defined by informational chaos. In a fragmented, algorithmic world, certainty itself can be a form of comfort. As philosopher Byung-Chul Han writes in The Expulsion of the Other, communication today no longer seeks understanding, it seeks affirmation. The spaces built by Hubbard and Piker offer precisely that, a controlled environment where one's worldview is continually mirrored back through ritualized engagement. The deeper irony is that both men have constructed what might be called cathedrals of the self. They are systems of belief that depend not on external authority, but on the believer's willingness to see themselves reflected within the ideology. To follow either man is, in a sense, to seek confirmation of one's own virtue, intelligence, and belonging. And yet, just as both have provoked intense backlash to their followers, each figure embodies authenticity in a world that feels increasingly artificial. The devotion persists, not because their claims withstand scrutiny, but because they satisfy a deeper need, the need to feel that one's understanding of the world is not only correct, but the most righteous. Though Hasan Piker and L Ron Hubbard share many striking similarities, as we've seen throughout this documentary, my thesis may have been somewhat misleading. While both men built movements on their own image, neither invented the blueprint they followed. The union of faith, performance, belief, and broadcast has much deeper roots in American life. For long before either man built his following, another blended revelation with ambition, founding a new religion, commanding armies of believers, and even seeking the presidency of the United States. Its first architect was
Joseph Smith, American Moses. Praise be to Joseph, American prophet and... Hello, my name is Joseph Smith. I'm going to fuck this baby. No, Joseph, don't fuck the baby. Joseph Smith, don't fuck the baby.
The fact that Joseph Smith Jr. can be seen either as history's most successful con artist or as one of the most recent Christian prophets is very telling in and of itself. While many historians conclude that the Book of Mormon was likely authored by Smith alone, and that its historical claims often lack any archaeological evidence, the religious movement that Smith founded nonetheless achieved what both Hubbard and Piker sought in their own followings. Smith's followers showed extraordinary loyalty, even facing violence and death in defense of the prophet and his community. When at the hour of his martyrdom at Carthage Jail in 1844, when Smith and his brother Hiram were killed by a mob after surrendering, their followers marking these deaths as sealing their testimony. In addition, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints maintained rigorous systems of tithing. Records from the 1840s show hundreds of pages of Nauvoo-era tithing donations, overseen by Smith himself. Smith, thereby, created the combination of belief, structure, loyalty, and economic commitment that both Hubbard and Piker would later echo in their own respective movements. But there's a key difference. Smith's movement, despite many controversies, produced adherents who, by and large, believed that they were part of something sacred and good. It is in this light that one can argue Hubbard and Piker both failed to replicate his model fully. Their followings have become far more aggressive, combative, and harassment-oriented in seeking advantage over opponents, rather than devoted in the quieter, sacrificial way that Smith's early community often was. But the question remains, what will become of both figures? It is hardly controversial to observe that the Church of Scientology is widely regarded in scholarly and popular discourse as a cultish movement, with the European Federation for Freedom of Belief describing Scientology as a cult, an extremist organization, or a fringe religion. In some countries, such as France, outright labeling the group as terrorists. In parallel, the discourse surrounding Hasan Piker frequently asserts that his online community functions as a radical echo chamber. The streamer has faced bans for content policy violations, and news outlets have documented multiple episodes of controversy. Scientology has now persisted for around 4 decades since its founder's departure. Although the church publicly claims growth, donor-leaked statistics and independent analysts suggest its recruitment is faltering, with one UK branch reporting 43,921 audit hours in the first half of 2025, only roughly 23% of the previous year's figure. Piker remains a major figure on Twitch, yet he endures condemnation from media and political figures, who argue that his platform may play a role in radicalizing youth. And with widespread allegations of praising terrorist organizations and reportage of extreme rhetoric, it's very easy to see why such a case is so frequently brought forward. Piker is so condemned by the mainstream media, in fact, that Congressman Richie Torres wrote to Daniel Clancy, Chief Executive Officer at Twitch, Steve Boom, Vice President of Audio, Twitch, and Games at Amazon.com Incorporated, and Andrew R. Jassy, President and Chief Executive Officer at Amazon.com Incorporated, to express his alarm at Piker's reach on the platform, despite the controversial anti-American stances he chooses to take. A parallel can be found in Scientology's history. After decades of litigation and negotiation, the IRS granted tax-exempt recognition to a network of Scientology entities in 1993, and celebrity adherents such as Tom Cruise helped shape the movement's public profile, factors that analysts say help protect and amplify the organization. Far too frequently, both movements have attracted scrutiny for aggressive tactics rather than moral leadership. While Scientology's early adherents adhered with personal devotion, some even dying for the cause, Piker's community increasingly uses harassment and outrage-driven mobilization as tools to gain advantage in cultural debates. In truth, only time will know how each legacy will settle, yet it would not surprise me if Piker's audience, much like Scientology, become much more insular and broadly viewed with skepticism, an outcome that already appears to be unfolding.